about, the maids coming or part-time help, like should we get them, should we not? And then you have to think about, okay, if they're coming from a certain area, now they're touching everything, and then who is interacting with them, and will they touch the same things? And so it's really forcing us. Or even if you get like a delivery from outside, a food delivery, or a, like a uh, online delivery of some sort, you have to put so much attention into every detail, into who's touching it, where did it come from, wiping it down. So it seems like those things are very, can feel quite annoying or irritating and very inconvenient, um, to examine every detail like that. But if you see what it's doing, it's really helping us practice that level, putting that level of awareness and putting that level of consciousness and care into every tiny thing we're doing. It's helping us learn to be conscious. Yeah, and so yeah, being careful forces us to be conscious and about small things like just ordering food or meeting a relative on their birthday, and big things like travel, work, and like larger life decisions as well. So how to cooperate with that is to care enough to be responsible. Um, a lot of people, say things like, "Oh, anyway, everyone's going to get it," or "Others are going out, so why can't I?" Or "How can I not go to so and so's birthday?" Um, and these are ways of rationalizing being irresponsible at this time, because being responsible is not always easy or fun. And the next point is about how the virus is making us, it's really forcing us to think about other people, um, because we always have, maybe a lot of us have that value of caring about others, or generally being aware of, okay, there's world hunger and there's poverty and there's, things that are wrong in the world, or injustice of, different sorts. um, but I feel like right now what's happening, it's really giving us a chance, especially because we're so cut off from our usual distractions, to, it's really opening our hearts in a way, um, and giving us a chance to really be considerate and think beyond ourselves in ways that we usually don't. um, and usually, this, you probably want to be that kind of person, but there's not that level of awareness where someone else's problem is your problem, right? But I've seen, like, even for myself, that, lately it's just become much more real. And so even if it's with the virus, there are certain populations that are more vulnerable, like older people are more vulnerable to the virus, people with asthma and diabetes and heart conditions. So we're forced to think about them, because even if we touch different surfaces and we say that's fine, okay, if I'm younger, nothing will happen to me, you can still be a carrier, right? So it is forcing us to think about other people who are more vulnerable and could actually, the effects of the virus can be much more detrimental for them. So that's one way. And also, the people who are suffering indirectly because of the virus, like the migrant workers, the daily wage workers, and the street animals and things like that. And even in my own life, I've seen that I've noticed these things more, and I've been more sort of giving to charities, and every day we go out and feed the street dogs, and I feel more of that personal engagement. And I've heard of people doing things as well. Like, we have a family friend who was collecting shoes for the migrant workers, and taking them to a village. And she just put out a request for, old shoes and things like that. And one person ordered 1,000 pairs of new shoes and just sent it to her. And it was just so beautiful to see that, mm, that act of charity. And she didn't even know how to load the truck by herself, so then these strangers offered to help her load the truck. And there's such beautiful examples of that kind of thinking about others and caring and actually acting based on that. So and also another huge thing that has taken us out of ourselves is even thinking about the environment, um, because it's so it's so obvious how the environment is better off without us. And like we're seeing peacocks on the street or in gardens, and I've never seen so many different birds in the garden. So yeah, that's another huge thing that's forcing us to think beyond ourselves, and also thinking about people in such difficult situations. I think it is also making us more grateful for what we have in comparison. So that's also a really good effect. And how to cooperate with this is to think beyond the self, um, care about the environment, and think of ways to remain continue this caring attitude even past the pandemic. Because why should it take a pandemic for us to notice how we're hurting the environment, or that there is inequality, or that people in the world are suffering? Now the next point is about that this pandemic is very humbling and ego smashing. And what I mean by that is, now if you think about what is ego, when I say ego, right, it is a part in all of us that just tries to survive. And it comes out of fear, um, and it is unconscious. It is not something we choose, it's something that just happens. So it's a very automatic thing, and it tries to control our experience, right? It tries to keep us safe, it tries to protect us. So it defends against our inner pain, our feelings, our discomfort, our fears, and it keeps us distracted in more external things. So now that everything external has been pulled away so dramatically, the ego has a hard time. So because the ego keeps trying to seek comfort and familiarity and pleasure, and its mechanism is to say, I want this and I want that. And so suddenly it's like our personal ego doesn't matter. So we are having to sacrifice ourselves for our ego, for the collective and for the higher good. So it's kind of like how it is in a war, where when someone's in a war, they are sacrificing themselves, their life even, for the higher good of the nation, right? So that's very ego dissolving. And in smaller ways as well, right? Like where there's things that used to matter before, like whether it's more superficial things like, okay, jewelry or makeup or clothes or money or cars, or all of that is useless right now. um, and now we're forced to focus on what really matters, which could be family or connection or our dreams or our hobbies or our contribution to the world. So yeah, that's another huge thing that's happening. And the ego dissolving is also a very hard thing. It's a very painful thing. So again, this is something that needs a lot of compassion, even though sometimes it can look so aggressive and people can resist it so much. Like I heard about yesterday, I heard about someone who he comes from a very wealthy and privileged background, and probably not someone who's used to his ego being questioned at all. And now they have these temperature guns that are taking people's temperature as they enter a place. And so there was a guard with a temperature gun, and they took this person's temperature. And he was so insulted at being questioned like that, that he beat up the guard. So that is because that person's just not used to their ego being threatened. It doesn't feel safe, right? uh, and that's not really excusable behavior, but it's it just really reveals how hard it is for some people to give up that ego, and there's a lot of resistance to this kind of humbling. So how to cooperate with that is, again, not to resist that discomfort, of the ego dissolving, to just allow the humbling to happen, and to introspect and question, your values, your beliefs, automatic behaviors, because this is a huge chance to learn a new way of being, and really, learn that energy of surrender and compassion and grace. And the last point here is that this virus is a great equalizer. And the way we can see that is, first of all, it's interesting how the virus has impacted us on such a global level, like that, the whole world is impacted by it. And it's uniting us all in this collective war. We're all in a war, we're all on the same side, which is quite unusual, because if we'd had something like another world war or something, it would have been just countries against each other. It would have just, involved a lot of ego, right? um, it wouldn't have had the same effect. So there is something about this collective suffering together that's very uniting and very equalizing. Of course, there are different degrees of inconvenience that are being caused to different sections of people, but it's still a universal experience at this point. And another thing that's happening is that it's equalizing different groups of people, especially privileged groups and non-privileged groups. So, like, even with men and women, I've heard a lot about, when now that the like men are not going to work and things, they're just more active and involved in like raising children and even doing the housework and things like that. Um, and like I never thought I'd see my dad doing so many dishes. It's like definitely something unusual and different that's happening right now. um and even like not having maids, right? Like that's also made people have to, who some people who haven't really, cleaned their own house or done their own housework, are suddenly having to do things that normally, the help would help out with. So that's also very equalizing. And the virus itself um, shows no preferential treatment, right? Because being rich or powerful or anything doesn't protect you from it. And so the Queen of England and like a beggar on the street are equally susceptible. And the virus has also it's also made us use the internet a lot more, like we're doing right now. And the internet is called the great equalizer because it gives equal access to everyone, to information and opportunities and things like that. So that's also a huge equalizing thing that's happening. So to cooperate with this, I would say it would be nice to, share at least one of your gifts, for free with the world, because the world is going through a hard time. So, I know people who are just doing like offering an online yoga class, or, um, offering that whatever their gift is, whatever they feel they want to contribute. Could be writing, could be anything, but some way of thinking of how to serve the world in some way and offering that is a nice thing to do. And also to contribute to the larger collective by, adding your unique voice or your opinion, or standing up for certain things with inequality or those kind of things that are happening in the world, or even contributing to charity or doing things like that, because there's not much we can do from just being bound at home. But whatever we can do through the internet or indirect ways, and to actually really value equality, because that is a huge lesson that's coming up right now. Yeah, so in conclusion, the coronavirus is really like this reset, has given us the opportunity to really reevaluate who we are, who we're being, and learn a new, more conscious way of being. And it's also giving us the time and opportunity to practice this new way of being and embody this new way of being, because it's one thing to understand it all in the mind, but then to actually practice these new values and qualities takes a whole, that's more difficult in some way. So yeah, so it's giving us the time and opportunity to do that. So yeah, it would be great if people could cooperate and try to think in these new ways and incorporate these new lessons that are coming with the virus. Thank you.
Thank you, Farina. Delivered. Can you just stop, yeah, sharing your screen?
Okay.
Okay, there you are. Well, I think just listening to you, as Nihal said while introducing you, is very calming. So it didn't sound like we were actually listening about a pandemic. It was like very soothing and like a balm being applied. There are a lot of questions. I'll try to consolidate them. Uh, the first question is, like we are having a video conference today. Uh, one can reach out to each other media. But it's not a substitute for a face-to-face meeting, especially for a psychologist like you, in addressing people's concerns or people's anxieties, because such an interaction could save somebody's life. And we keep hearing of suicides nowadays during this pandemic. People's mental health is getting affected. So how do you bridge this gap during this pandemic? This question is from Mr. Rajaram from Pune.
So, like, is the question like, what can we do to support people who need that kind of connection?
Yes, because right now you can only support on video. A physical interaction is not feasible. So how do you bridge this gap? Because lives could be lost if they are not met by people and counseled in person.
Yeah, but I would, I mean, yes, there's definitely a merit to face-to-face contact and just basic human connection. There is obviously a very strong benefit of, even things like physical touch, because now we can't even physically touch each other, right? Much less. So there are definitely benefits to these things in physical, like in real time. But I would argue that it's quite powerful to because at least even the way I work is mostly remote. It always has been. I have clients all over the world, and I've always done it remotely, and it's very powerful. So I think it's totally possible to be extremely connected and supportive, and maybe through the internet, maybe through connecting with friends over the phone, or and like I said, there's a lot of inspiring things online. There's a lot of inspiration, there's a lot available. So in that way, I think the pandemic is being quite kind, because imagine if we didn't have internet, imagine if we didn't have phone conversations and all that was cut off, or we didn't have Netflix. It would be a lot harder. So I think there is a lot available, and there's so much even on YouTube and things, even about the kind of work that I do, and raising consciousness and using this as an opportunity, because being in solitude is a perfect requirement for that. So it's just people not knowing they have the option to see it a different way, to not knowing how to dip into their feelings, how to heal themselves. That's the thing that's missing, that they don't even know it's an option, they don't even know to think about it this way.
The next one is relating to senior citizens. FOSWL is a forum for senior citizens. So the question is, organizations like the WHO and the CDC and our Ministry of Family and Health and Family Welfare in India, various state governments have put out a lot of advisories, do's and don'ts on how to remain safe during this pandemic. wearing a mask, washing your hands, safe distancing, physical distancing, so on and so forth. None of them seem to have foreseen or have been cognizant of the effect on people's psychology, psyche, or mental health. And there have not been any guidelines on how to overcome these feelings of anxiety, loneliness. Do you think that is something that was an oversight of these global organizations and it should have been there?
Um, well, on one hand, yes, of course. On one hand, yes, but the thing is, like, even the World Health Organization, I think in a lot of ways, a lot of people are making the mistake of seeing this as a purely seeing it on a purely physical level, on a purely medical level, right? And in that process, of course, they're overlooking this opportunity that I was talking about, which is the non-physical part, right? Which is the consciousness, the growth, the pain, the suffering, the inner fears, and the feelings that are coming up. Um, that they're not seeing it the same way, they're seeing it from a very physical lens. So of course that would happen, but then organizations like that tend to do that, right? That is the more diagnostic, the more medical model. It does focus on those things, so in a way it's not it's not generally in their purview, and maybe that's why something like this is happening, so that maybe in the future we can have a more integrated approach and not overvalue the physical, and actually have a more integrated approach where we value what's happening on an inner level too.
Thank you. The next question is actually picked up from one of your slides, I think. On the one hand, this pandemic has enabled or made it possible to rediscover relationships, reinvent them. But on the other hand, in one of your slides, you said there has been an increased incidence of things like domestic violence.
Mm.
You have men and women doing chores they were not normally used to, but there's also a undesirable fallout of this pandemic and being together for such long times. Uh, can you comment on that? Why this happens?
um yeah, sort of like, I'll go back to one of the things I said in the beginning, which is that in the world, if we look at it, there's an energy of consciousness and there's energy of unconsciousness, or what we call negative, painful, difficult, bad, and then an energy of what is light, or like loving, compassionate, joyful. So if we look at it that way, then both these things are amplifying right now. But whenever there's something bad or negative, like even things like domestic violence, or even really unpleasant things, that there's so many horrible, unfair things that happen in the world, um, and all those things that we call badness or unconsciousness have an opportunity to because let's say there's a couple, and this woman has been beaten for years, and now her husband's at home all the time, and he's like hitting her all the time. So it could give her that self-worth or that self-respect to walk out, right? And people, like the organizations that are helping these people, are getting more calls as well. They're getting more calls from the women saying, I want to leave, I finally want to leave, because like I said, there's more support for the good thing as well, which is the equality that comes out of that. So there's always a potential and opportunity for good to come out of the so-called bad.
Okay. So here's a question which says, a comment rather. Uh, Most of us in FOSWL being senior citizens, would you agree that we are much better equipped to handle a pandemic like this? Because we have already mastered the art of keeping our emotions and egos under check at our age. So do you see that actually as a phenomena, that this anxieties, loneliness, and sense of frustration being more in the younger age group or a certain age group compared to senior citizens? Is that true from your observations?
Hmm, so I'll say two things. In general, like there's a before and an after. So like before Corona, sometimes when people are older, they can be more set in their ways, right? So they can potentially, some of them, this is overgeneralizing, may not question things because they've done things a certain way for a long time and it's worked. So they can be quite more set in their ways. But there's a before and after Corona. But after Corona, I feel like I have seen this. One of the things about this pandemic is that it's hit not just all over the world, but it's hit all across age groups, right? So everyone is almost equally affected or equally, like open and suddenly humbled. So, but yeah, of course, it's possible that that senior citizens are, especially those who approach life a certain way and value a certain kind of living. Of course, they probably, are mature and they value that maturity. And in that maturity, they're usually not so um, seeking material external things that much, right? So in that sense, yeah.
So there is some advantage to being a senior citizen, I guess, at times like this. Uh, the next question is from our assistant professor Raghavendra. He says, most of the schools and colleges are now conducting their classes online. So children tend to learn using iPad or laptop or mobile. Now, in the short and medium term, how do you think this online education will affect the children's psyche or brain or their attitudes? What do you see as the fallout of this lack of a physical classroom?
Mm, yeah, that's definitely a downside, and hopefully just a temporary one. Like hopefully things will, in a year or two get back to new normal and there'll be interaction again. Because like I said, that is a very important thing to the human psyche and for our well-being. Um, but temporarily, I think, generally being online, and whether it's children or whether it's older people being on their phones or iPads, or it just causes a lot of disconnection. And So hopefully, at least for children, right, being at home, having enough time without their online, gadgets, and actually connecting with their siblings or connecting with parents and things like that would be a good thing to have enough of.
Okay. Here's an interesting comment, I think, not a question, but from our PV Sannyasi Rao. He is a past district governor of our Rotary district, to some of the Rotarians who are there. He says he's 73 years old, and before Corona, his sugar levels were 220 to 220, 270 range. But after the pandemic, they have come down to 104, 124. Blood pressure also has come down to manageable limits, and he says his health is in much better shape than it was earlier. So I'll let you answer this, and I'll also invite Dr. Ravi Ramaswamy to comment on this. The beneficial fallout on health is a new angle. I've heard it from others also. So Farida, would you go first?
Well, I'm assuming that has a lot to do with like eating at home and being at home and eating healthy, or the stress of daily life being cut out. Um, because I'm not sure what else would account for such good health results.
Yeah, Ravi, would you like to supplement?
Yes, absolutely. I think one of the things is uh, you become more aware of your own health. I think one of the things that we've always talked about, and in the previous meetings, is to have a strong immune system. And one of the things that across the board, across the world, even here in the CDC and the National Institute of Health and all of those, what they have neglected to do is to say, hey, you're going to be under lockdown for the next 2 months. You have a great opportunity to take care of your health. During these 2 months, try to lose weight, try to stop smoking, try, get into good habits, try to do some exercising if permitted, and make sure that at the end of 2 months, you're in great or better shape, which will then help you to combat not just the coronavirus, but everything else. And so I think what's happening with the blood sugar going down, et cetera, is a more keen awareness of your health. You know that outside world, you have this deadly virus that is causing a lot of problems, but within the confines of your home, you have that control to take care of your health and take care of your medical issues and try to get better. And so I think that is what translates into people. Now, on the other hand, I've been seeing a lot of patients that have actually gained weight, that have actually been binge watching television, being a couch potato, and have gained somewhere between 15 to 30 pounds. So that can work the other way as well. But it just gives us an opportunity to be aware of what is going on. And then may I also have one question for Dr. Chinoy, which is excellent talk. I really enjoyed it. Is one of the one of our classmates sent us a very interesting bumper sticker, which I want you to comment on. And that one is, obviously, like you mentioned, the glaciers have stopped melting, the air pollution has gone down, and a lot of benefits have come from this. And the bumper sticker that he sent us was, what if in reality humans were the virus and corona the vaccine? Can you comment on that?
Hmm. Yeah, I sort of agree with that. I heard someone yesterday who was sort of a spiritual, channel, and he was saying that, according to him, he said the human race had come very close to a point of no return. So he said the Mother Earth has gone through a lot of things. She would have maybe 2 or 3 centuries, she would have recovered, right? She's gone through dinosaurs and all kinds of things. We are nothing. We are only 200,000 years old. So, so yeah, this is actually more of a lesson for the human race. This is actually just protecting us. And he even said that if we don't cooperate with this, then he said, I predict there may be floods, the internet may go off, it'll do whatever it takes. It's like nature has suddenly become strict, like a strict parent. And until now it was nudging, 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 and we were sort of doing our own thing. And now it's like it's become sort of, it's like tough love is happening right now. So I agree. I think that we are the problem. And luckily, we also we are the problem. But since we are, compared to animals and things that don't have consciousness, we also have the power to be the solution. So that's quite beautiful as well.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ravi. Uh, so here's an interesting tidbit from FOSWL, Cupertino. I believe Mrs. Umar writes that one of their members wrote that he is very happy that this pandemic happened. He says he used to spend time alone at home, and now he gets to talk to his son instead of his highs and buys every morning and evening. So he's actually found the pandemic has brought him closer to his, children with whom he's staying. And the related one from one Mr. Krishnamurti Gandhi, I think, his name is not clear, but he says he's come across some aged people who, due to these restrictions at home, have gone into some kind of a depression. Now, I do not know the social conditions that are contextual to this question, but he wants to get your thoughts and suggestions for people like that who are less listening into a depression, just staying at home.
Yeah, yeah, that is happening a lot. And like that is a hard thing. It is difficult, and like I said, there is a sort of helplessness or out of controlness that's inherent in this situation. So unfortunately, there's not like a, usually in life when we're going about normal things, there's normally like some kind of a fix it or some kind of a, take this and try this and a magic pill you try to find somewhere. And unfortunately for this, there is no such thing. So the main thing is just, I think, the the giving a lot of like compassion, a lot of a lot of love and compassion, as much connection as possible, and also like talking and listening, and those things, they seem so small but they're huge, and especially for people who are older, I think they need that. And it's quite wonderful when they can sort of share their own stories. Like over here, I've been spending a lot of time with my grandfather, and sometimes, yes, I feel that there's a collective depression, right? There's a depression in the collective. So of course they feel that, and a lot of people are feeling that in different ways. um, and so I think, yeah, that just listening to their stories, and just talking, and listening to their feelings, and maybe even something spiritual, or like I've been playing these chants for my grandfather, these like spiritual chants, or things like that, that, like I said, there's a very conscious energy also available. So doing things like that can make them access that more. Um, yeah, so I'd say just connections, and certain maybe like healing music, so this alternative sort of things.
That's a good note to bring the next comment on. Uh, Mr. Dinesh says, just like what you've said, is there a certain kind of daily routine that you would recommend for seniors that can be followed during these times? I just heard you say some chants and music and stuff like that. So his question is, can you suggest a kind of a daily routine, for this time?
mm, well, sure. Like I'd say one thing is important to, like some kind of meditation would be nice, because again, that's a good way to tap into the collective, and feel that consciousness. So I think meditation in the morning is great, and then something like yoga, or like breathing, or some gentle form of exercise, and then eating healthy. Trying to eat healthy, and I think things like, even things like journaling, writing, is a really good way of, connecting with the self, or processing whatever's coming up. And if they can find some kind of their own gifts, or like everyone has strengths, everyone has natural strengths, everyone has interests and hobbies. It's such a good time to, like, no matter what the age is, it doesn't matter, like you still have gifts. And so to really channel those out is a really nice thing. And then to make some time maybe in the evening to like connect or be outdoors, that's a very important one, to spend time outdoors in nature as much as possible. And then connecting. So even if it's like group calls, right, in the evening, every day at 7 o'clock, the whole family gets together on a video call, things like that. Mm, and then sleeping, like relatively early, along with the cycles of nature. So when it sort of gets dark, or um, like around 10 o'clock is ideal, and then waking up around 6 is, how the nature cycles work. So yeah.
Another question slash observation is, do you think the context in which this question is asked, I think, is the younger generation, especially of a certain age group, is so used to, what you call as bad habits, use of drugs and alcoholism, smoking, whatever.
Mhm.
Uh, do you think the pandemic has actually been a savior for that kind of group? So that, in the sense that they were not able to indulge as much. So there are instances of people being told that they are very depressed because they cannot have their daily drink. But there are also cases where people's health has improved, recovered. So from a psychology point of view, what do you think is the impact on people with those kind of habits?
Mm, I would say this ties into, a lot of the things I was saying earlier from a consciousness point of view. These habits, or are things that take us away, like they help us avoid our like feelings or our pain or what's going on inside. So they're distractions, right? So taking those away, it's just like the domestic violence thing, where of course it amplifies the problem, right? Of course, the when you take those crutches away, it is painful, it is difficult, those symptoms flare up. So the anxiety or the depression or the the trauma, the pain that's underneath flares up and sometimes even gets projected on someone. So they could like be more aggressive, or they could be more self-destructive. They might so all that negativity flares up, yes. But if it's approached the right way, and that's why there's such a call for like just the energy of compassion and love and awareness, and if they know how to sit with that feeling, or just um, process that feeling or be with it, then that will calm down, and then it'll make them much healthier, better, compassionate, just better human beings. So overall, it's a good thing. It's just people knowing how to handle that temporary flare up, which is happening around the world and in our individual selves.
Right. Uh, there's an observation I'll share before asking the next question. And that is that Mrs. Uma from FOSWL Cupertino says one of the fallouts of this pandemic has been that we've been able to husband our resources more prudently, like the old generations. You don't go out and splurge as much. And even Sannyasi Rao has been saying that he spent very little money in the last, few months than he normally would. So there's a sense of more prudence that has crept in. And that's an observation of Mrs. Uma. Let me take the...
Yeah, absolutely. And less waste, especially when we were afraid that provisions would run out. I think everyone sort of learned how to cut down on excess, which is a really good thing.
Yeah.
Subbu,
Hold on, Sannyasi, we'll come to you. Hold on. Just trying to summarize a few questions together here. Yeah. So there are a couple of questions, but what it means is it was an excellent talk. We can understand, what you're kind of alluding to for the general population. But the frontline workers, like the health workers, like the doctors, the policemen, the sanitary staff, they are subjected to much more consequences of the pandemic compared to the rest of us who are staying home. Can you comment to the impact of this on them and if they should be doing something differently? Have governments across the world addressed this issue at all? Because we hear of several doctors being directly impacted mentally by this situation.
Yeah. So sorry, was the question about the doctors being impacted, or the people who are in more disadvantaged positions?
The doctors, the policemen, and the sanitary workers who are on the front line of fighting this pandemic.
Okay, about them. Okay. Well, yeah, and in a way, really, that they are the heroes of this, right? And that's it's really something where if we were in a movie and it's this sort of like this is the villain and these are the heroes, and so yeah, it is really important to take care of. And I'm sure that sorry, it says that I'm being muted. Can you hear me?
Go ahead, yes.
Yeah. um so there's definitely
There's a dog barking somewhere, I don't know. Oh, it's here? Okay.
yeah.
Go ahead.
Is it very loud? I can try to move.
No, that's fine. Go ahead.
So
it is distracting. Yep. Is there a way to control him?
I don't know.
Maybe he's not happy during Corona times here.
Father's gone to take care of it.
Okay. Okay. So sorry about that. Yeah, so they're definitely sort of the heroes of this period and what's happening, and it is a tricky situation. So although yes, I think that it's very important that the government step in and do more to protect them, and it was very terrible, especially when when they were being in the beginning, I remember when they were being attacked, and like there were videos of the cops attacking the doctors and things, and that was very disturbing, very disturbing. So yeah, a lot more needs to be done to protect them, and I think also, but this it's just that right now it's like, yes, the government could do more, but I don't know how much. I think governments don't know how to handle this. They're probably in such a frenzy because there are so many factors and there are so many people to protect. Like there are some much more disadvantaged groups too, right? Like the what to do with the migrant workers? Should they get them trains or not? Like there's just, you have to factor in so many human elements. I don't think this is something that anyone has had to do or had to think in these ways. There are so much more complex and require so much consciousness. So of course governments are not equipped for this at all, and it's going to be huge learning even for them and for all systems, even organizations, corporations, schools, everything, educational systems. It's going to rewire all our systems. So yes, they could do more, but of course they're not equipped, and of course there's just a huge learning curve for the whole world with this.
Thank you. Sannyasi, I'll unmute you now, but please restrict to 1 minute.
Okay, okay. One thing, it pinches me. Everybody says senior citizens and senior citizens. Even regularly or now, willpower is important. You should have willpower. Always go with positivity. Don't go with negativity. A table says that even the middle-aged people nowadays, 40% of the middle-aged people are also getting the coronavirus. Yeah. And I request the people, I know my wife or our family members will discourage us, but at the same time, you do not convince them. But you have to act according to their wishes. Yes, if it is necessary, even if it is necessary, I don't go out. Because my daughter asked me, is 2 lakhs is important or your life is important? So that's, you have to keep that in mind and we have to behave like that. Thank you, Subbu.
Thank you. Would you like to say something on that?
Yeah, that basically, it is. I agree that to question that whether to go out or not, and it is true that, yeah, even younger people are being affected. So overall, this is just an opportunity for all of us to go along with the general current, right? Because it almost, like, general current of the world is almost like being in a funeral. And sometimes when people are just trying to deny what's happening, it's like they're just trying to continue to party, and it's like, why are you partying when the funeral going on, right? There's a certain level of disconnect in that. So I think it's important that we all cooperate. It's not just the senior citizens that are affected. And as I said, we can all be carriers. So even if we, and we don't know for sure. There's so many 30-year-olds, 20-year-olds who are dying. So we don't know anything about this, is the truth.
Zach, would you like to offer a comment? Can you unmute yourself? Zach, are you there?
Amount happened.
Okay, let me unmute Rajaram Garu. Any comments? Can you unmute yourself?
Yes, here I am, here from Pune. I think it was a wonderful talk and very thought-provoking.
I think you have another phone nearby.
Yeah, I'm just taking the cue from what Subbarao Garu said about senior citizens and being more equipped to handle these bouts of depression or loneliness that the young people who are mostly used to being going out and so on. So I thought that would it be possible to, just a thought of the mind, that senior citizens themselves could form some support groups in order to counsel these young people, because they just want to break away and want to go, want to meet people, and that's not possible. So I think senior citizens, having seen life over 70 years or 60 years up plus, would be better equipped. And I know that Usha, that's Subbu's wife, I remember having seen one on Facebook where ETV offers such counseling. Am I correct, Subrahma Garu?
It's a suicide prevention helpline. Yeah. It's called Roshni. It's a suicide prevention helpline. Thank you. Ravi, would you like to comment and add something?
Okay. Yeah, I think in terms of the disconnect that we are talking about, I think when we get involved in something that is so overwhelming, there is a degree of desensitization that takes place. It's like what we see violence on TV and stuff like that. After a while, when we see the shots of blood and everything else, we just get desensitized. So this thing is something that has desensitized us because of the sheer numbers. And when things get so overwhelming, there is a sense of disbelief that also sets in. I think there was a question on the chat box about how to deal with the hoax factor of is this all a big hoax, etc. So those kinds of things. You have people going out, as you know, there's a lot of riots going on here locally, and people going out without masks. And on the one hand, they say that I have friends of mine that were not even able to go to their relatives' funeral because of social distancing. But then you see people are allowed to protest without masks and are able to shout and not maintain social distancing. And then all of a sudden it becomes quite okay. As you know, the president is holding a rally today in Oklahoma, where there's going to be thousands and thousands of people, most of them not wearing masks. Then the government says, no, you got to do social distancing. So after a while, this whole thing becomes very surreal, and then you don't know whom to believe. And then you have the media overblowing some of these things. And after a while, you just have to use your own intelligence, intellect, and use your own personal guidelines to say which is what is good for me. So basically that's what I have to say. And once again, I really enjoyed this talk.
Thanks, Ravi. Farina, can you just unshare your screen?
That's not my screen. It's someone else's screen.
Someone else's screen?
Yeah, it says you are viewing Anshuman's screen.
Okay, let me. Whoever is sharing the screen, can you please unshare it, please? Yeah, thank you. May I now invite, thank you all for your questions. I'm sorry that I could not obviously pose all those questions to the speaker. I tried my best to consolidate them and combine them and ask. May I now invite our secretary, Mr. Subhash Chandra Bose, to propose a vote of thanks. You have to unmute yourself, Andy. Yeah.
Am I audible?
Yes, you are. Please go ahead. Sundaram Garu. Can you mute yourself, Sundaram Garu?
I could not completely. It was, I think, muted or something. But I could follow the last answer.
Okay, thank you. Can you mute yourself now? We are ending the meeting.
Okay, it's all right. Carry on. Go ahead, sir.
Can you mute yourself?
Huh?
Please mute yourself. Mute yourself.
Go ahead, sir.
Okay. Bose Garu.
Okay. Thank you all for joining this Zoom meeting in these times of disconnect. We are especially happy that several guests have also joined us from several cities and countries. We invite you to join us in our forthcoming meetings too, as we expect that FOSWL meetings will be held online for the next few months at least. We thank the family members of Sri R.S.N. Murthy for establishing an annual endowment lecture in his name. We also thank Sri Chidambarao Garu for sponsoring the logistics support for the month of June every year. It was a pleasure and very enlightening to listen to Dr. Farina Shenoy's excellent talk on coronavirus as an agent of consciousness. It was like a breath of fresh air amidst all the negativity we have been subjected to during this pandemic. Many of us may have been a bit intrigued by the title of today's talk. I certainly was. During these past few months, most if not all of us have surely experienced some degree of anxiety or uncertainty, a kind of helplessness and listlessness, and sometimes a subconscious fear of the unknown too. Many may have brooded on those aspects of their life they may never have consciously thought about earlier, be it their own health or relationships or even the very purpose of life. Many things we took for granted were suddenly revealed to us in the context of their true value and mutual dependency. We also suddenly realized that we can do with a lot less than we hitherto thought we needed. However, these thoughts and feelings were mostly in the realm of some vague, undefined form. Today's talk has helped us direct these thoughts in an organized manner to relate them to the various elements of the universe we coexist in, and helped us ruminate on a possible higher purpose of this pandemic. We learned of how pandemics are a part of human history and how coronavirus had impacted our consciousness with its punishing reach, cutting across the boundaries of nations without discriminating between the rich and the poor. Thank you, Dr. Farina Shenoy, for fielding our questions with such clarity and patience. We especially thank you for the considerable effort that must have gone into putting together the presentation slides. I must thank Sri Nihal Pavali, the young advocate and a school contemporary of Dr. Farina, for introducing the distinguished speaker for today in such an interesting and informal manner. FOSWL meets on the third Saturdays of each month. Since March 2020, we have been meeting on Zoom conferences. We had earlier decided that FOSWL will hold only virtual meetings till June 2020. The executive committee reviewed the situation in the context of the government advisories and decided that we will meet on Zoom till at least October 2020 to start with, and may extend it to December 2020 based on the then prevailing situation. I invite all our guests who are with us today to join us for these very interesting monthly talks that FOSWL Hyderabad arranges. Next month on Saturday, 18th July 2020 at 6:30 p.m. on Zoom, we have invited Dr. Subbarao Duburi, IAS, former governor of RBI, who will speak on the role of central banks in the economy, especially in the present context. On Saturday, 15th August 2020 at 6:30 p.m., which will also be on Zoom, Mr. Nishant Nair from Google Singapore will talk on navigating the world with Google Maps. Once again, it was great to meet with all of you this evening. Wish you all a good and safe weekend. Good night, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you all.
Well, that brings us to the end of this evening. Thank you all. And Farina, big thumbs up for you. It was very nice. I've known Farina since she was probably in the 6th or 7th class or 8th, I don't recall. And it's good to see this young lady become such an accomplished professional. You make us all proud. So wish you a safe passage and safe stay in the most affected country, I would say, after. So good night. I'll now call off the meeting.
Congratulations and congratulations to the speaker and the organizers. Thank you, sir, Sundaram.
Thank you, Surangaru. Bye-bye.